Welcome to the Courageous Ambassador podcast. Today we have a special guest, Dr. George Ackerman. He's an online professor here at Grace Christian University teaching criminal justice. He's the author of the book, A Son's Journey from Parkinson's Disease Caregiver to Advocate. And during our interview, we discuss him meeting Michael J. Fox, the growth of Parkinson's awareness, and some of the challenges this community faces today. All right, well, let's get started so we can have some time to work through some questions. I want to hear some of your story. Um, Before we really get into the meat of everything and just kind of getting to know who you are and what you're doing, I feel like I need to begin with asking you about Michael J. Fox. So
No problem.
you sent that photo to us of you meeting him, and of course you guys are in probably in like similar circles and all that stuff. What was that like? How did you come across
I
uh
met him a few years ago at an event, and then we've been, working. Unfortunately, it's just me, so I'm not as big a voice, but he's always been a hero because and I actually got it. I won't say who or what, but I got a email just before from on Instagram, just before I came on, with a gentleman who's very, very, very famous, but told me he doesn't want to talk about Parkinson's yet, so it's respectable. But that's why I love Michael J. Fox, is he didn't have to do that. But since he announced he was diagnosed at age 29 or 30, actually 28, he has been a hero to the people in the Parkinson's community, and they've
Mhm.
raised over I think, $1 billion, not million, towards a cure. It was
Mhm.
beautiful to see him, and he, had
Mhm.
didn't have a lot to say because it's an overwhelming situation with all those people. But it was definitely, as usual, another honor to meet him.
For sure, for sure. Yeah, or at least for what I know, and I don't know much about the neurological disease or like the community behind it and all that. But he's one of the bigger names of advocates. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's Michael J. Fox, Muhammad Ali, and Ozzy, who unfortunately Ozzy Osbourne we lost recently. So
Yep.
but unfortunately, again, the worst part is no matter how much I advocate, whether it's 24/7, seems the diagnosis are increasing. So it's almost like odd, you kind of get hopeful when you see, people reaching out, thanking me and things, but then you realize in every 20 minutes someone's diagnosed. I don't know if we're taping yet or this counts. So I'll wait till we start. But to be honest, I mean, there's believe it's shocking that right now we have about 1 million people in the U.S., which if it happens to your family, that's your world, like ours crumbling. But that's not a lot of people in the world, in the U.S., 1 million. But they
Mhm.
did say statistics show that the diagnoses are going to go from 1 million to 20 million in just 10 years. So it's pretty frightening.
Wow. Wow. You're obviously like in the circles and probably hearing a lot of that stuff that's going on and the updates. Um, do you know why that's the case? Like, is it just there were just people that are unsure about being diagnosed, or is there something that's like coming to light in those circles?
Yeah, just that question could be an hour conversation because it is actually, people may be misdiagnosed, not diagnosed, not sure what's
Mhm.
wrong, but they believe it's more environmental. So whether it's the pesticides that we're using in the, bug sprays, whether it's what we're putting on our food in the supermarket, it's also, I've been told, speaking to experts, even the laundry. I always joke saying when I interviewed one of the world renowned doctors, he told me your laundry, and I kind of didn't hear the rest of the show. I wanted to figure out how to take my clothes off and get rid of them because that's
Yeah.
frightening. I didn't know that, but a lot of it is just there's something called paraquat that's banned in every country except the U.S. and Australia, and that's from chemicals that they use again on the sprays, like on the grass, on landscaping, and it's poison. And we need everyone out there listening to
Yeah.
contact their legislators because we're not doing enough as far as the government. They just passed in last December, former President Biden passed the National Plan to End Parkinson's. It's the first bill in U.S. history, which just that in and of itself is shocking. That's the only time they've ever passed anything to help with Parkinson's patients. But since the new president took over, new administration, it's kind of nothing's happened since last
Mhm.
December. So I was selected one of 250, I think, or 200 advocates in the country to represent the Michael J. Fox Foundation in D.C. So I had
Mm.
the honor last March to go to the Capitol and meet with legislators, and it was beautiful, even if my legislators weren't as available. But the whole building was literally for Parkinson's awareness. It was kind of a moment I'll never
Mm.
forget. They invited me to go again, so I'll be going back. I don't know if I'll be able to keep continuing just because I feel a lot of the work for political I've done already in my area and in South Florida. And, obviously you have to keep trying, but some don't seem responsive, unfortunately enough, in my experience. And again, a lot of the work I could do from home rather than go head up there. But it's just something I like to be a part of, and it's history.
Mm.
And I hope someday that they'll listen, and they created a council that hasn't even been seated now since December. So
Mm.
it's been a tough time for people who are excited about the bill passing until look at this a year later, nothing has been done. So I urge everyone listening to contact their representatives. This is a great time for a show because people can actually do something, get involved, don't have to pay a penny, just make
Yeah,
a call, send an email. And I do feel I could send a million letters, which I do, but they might be thrown out or unresponsive. However, imagine if we had, a million people throughout the United States writing to their legislators. I feel we'd make a bigger impact.
for sure. Yeah, most of the people who will be like listening to this, they may not have experience with Parkinson's or have people in their lives who have dealt with it. They probably most likely have heard of it, and like maybe even know people that have dealt with it, but not like maybe not somebody who's like personal in their lives. For people like that who are listening, what are some things that they could do outside of course, donating to organizations and offering help in that way? Like a lot of our listeners are going to be college students and things like that. What are some things that you can think of off the top of your head that like a college student or somebody who's just misinformed um, can jump in and begin being an advocate, sort of like you are?
Yeah, it's very simple because luckily this generation you're talking about, my students are on social media. So even just joining me, if you go to togetherforsharon.com, scroll down a little, is it looking like perfect for the holiday? It looks like a Christmas tree, but
Mm.
it's a LinkedIn, it's a tree link, and you can find me on every social media there is. And all they have to do is really follow me, join me, and they can learn about a lot of information. I have my own podcast. We've interviewed 400 experts around the world. We've had
Wow.
celebrity. We even had Bernie Kosar, who's a legendary football player. We've had the gentleman Jeffrey Weissman. He's the actor who played Michael J. Fox's dad in Back to the Future 2 and 3. We've had U.S. Senator Rick Scott has been on the show. So it's been growing and growing, and it's so easy to become an advocate. It's not like I have, unfortunately, I've been affected because I lost my mother best friend to the disease, but you don't have to have actual family affected. You might even have a neighbor, a friend, a relative that you're not aware of, or just someone at the grocery store, a manager. But now more and more people are being affected. All they really have to do is care. It doesn't take any money or really much time to just join, follow the work we're doing. It's just
Mm.
me. We're not a big company or a huge organization. Some days I do stay up 24/7 advocating because I miss my mother. And, she battled for 15 years and she was only 69, which to me is too young to pass. And I felt she lost 15 years alive due to Parkinson's and likely 15 years after she passed. So we
Mm.
started our website togetherbySharon.com. We don't accept money. We just want to make sure everyone never feels alone. I felt very alone. Didn't know who to turn to, what to do. My mother actually thought she was the only person in the world with Parkinson's because we just were unaware. And that's why
Yeah.
we started the website. And I thought we'd have 3 or 4 people, and that would have been great. But we've had over 60,000 visit the site. And
Wow.
again, like you said, I've written several books, which I didn't want to do. I didn't want to be an advocate. If we
Hmm.
get to my background, teaching here has been honestly a dream come true because it's when you teach, even if it's online, you become family. I've been, I think, at Grace for over 15 years. It's
Mm.
goes quickly, but I started my career as someone who had a passion for helping individuals. And growing up in Brooklyn, New York, unfortunately, I saw a lot of crime. So I always wanted to, my vision as a student even was to, how do I help my community and how do I help specifically victims of crime. So I became a attorney in Florida and Washington and did that for a while. But in working in the prosecutor's office, I found he didn't have the time that I wanted to help victims because he had too many cases. So I
Mhm.
thought, why not go into the field? And that's what I teach here, business and criminal justice. But why not become a police officer? And in a way, that's kind of, some people might say, wait a minute, are you supposed to do police and then law? Well, I kind of went backwards because I thought I didn't care about, the degree at the time. I just wanted to help people.
Mhm.
So, as a police officer, that was interesting because they didn't like lawyers and they didn't like new people, trainees. So that was the challenge. But that's, all this stuff we're talking about today for all the students and
Mhm.
faculty. It builds character, it builds perseverance, whether it's the finals coming and you're stressed and your family, you have to keep pushing forward no matter what you do. So I unfortunately found quickly that even in law enforcement, there's too many calls. You hand a brochure, you have to move to the next call, and that was kind of
Mhm.
tragic for me. So I was lucky enough, in a way, to find my home, which was the teaching profession. I was able to do my dissertation and PhD on aiding African American mothers who lost their loved ones due to murder, West
Mhm.
Palm Beach, Florida, where I reside now in Florida,
Mhm.
and sitting knee to knee, working with people who tragically lost a loved one was something that changed my life. And I learned in my research, and it's out there, and I can always send a copy. I don't know if anybody wants to read 300-page dissertation, but the only way those individuals, those mothers, could have ever reintegrated or gotten back their life into society after loss was through faith, religion, and community. And those
Mhm.
are some of the ideals I believe our mission mirrors. And my whole life, again, as we'll discuss, shifted, changed, and sadly came kind of way tumbling down when my mother was diagnosed with Parkinson. But for 7 years, she was able to live independently and didn't really affect our lives. I thought Parkinson's was just a thing, didn't even know it's disease until the last 4 years when something happened and it just
Mhm.
progressively, really fast. The diagnosis just went like it's something I'd never even seen before.
Mhm.
And that's when my life shifted from, victims of crime to caregiving and now today to
Mhm.
advocacy. And in an odd way, I do correlate victims of crime with people in the Parkinson's community because
Mhm.
a lot of times they're just forgotten. And that's why I do what I do today, not for money, not for anything. And just even during the holidays, it's tough for me and my family because we have an empty seat at our table.
Mhm. For sure. Yeah, I was going to ask about how has your experience with teaching online classes here at Grace Christian University and the years that you've spent here with students and your time spent in law enforcement and you being an advocate for Parkinson's, how have those experiences impacted the way that you like do work with students and criminal justice, as well as continuing to advocate for people to be informed from about this disease and care for those who are struggling with this and the family members and continue to seek a cure for it. How has that shaped your view and in what ways has your experience in these different areas impacted it?
Teaching advocacy and teaching to me are the only reasons, and my family, but I can even make it through the day. Even
Mm,
some of the more tough days battling with my mother, I would turn to teaching to kind of forget life for a moment. I do love teaching. Again, we all do it because we have a passion. We're not there to become, Bill Gates and things like that. But it's just a time where you learn from, I don't care how many degrees I have, still learn from every student, every person, even from you and your audience. I feel like I still have a lot to learn. Doesn't matter again how many degrees I have. And, sometimes if you forget, the students will remind you.
yeah.
But, the biggest thing is with at least shifting the world, teaching and Grace has always been supportive to me. Former CJ Dean actually gave an endorsement for one of my books because I actually wrote a book on law enforcement and the lack of awareness in Parkinson's disease, and
Mm,
it's a very important thing, right? Well, just to start in a way, Parkinson's is one of the fastest growing neurological disorders in the world. 1 million people in the U.S. and 10 million out of the U.S. Sometimes we forget there are other countries, but there's actually 10 million people battling it. And it's something that it doesn't discriminate. It can affect men, women, age
Mm.
doesn't matter anymore. There's something called young onset. So more younger people from 20s, 30s are getting Parkinson's diagnosis. The old days, people had the misconception that it was just an elderly white man disease, but that's no longer true.
Mm.
Happens to females, pregnant women, to African American, to Spanish, to anyone. It can happen to us sitting here. I've
Yeah.
recently been tested, but they don't believe it's genetic, so I don't have PD, but doesn't mean tomorrow won't occur. And some of the most important things to realize is every journey is different. So what happened to my mother doesn't necessarily mean it'll happen to someone else diagnosed, which is why there's no cure. And even testing, there's no actual test to find out for
Mm.
if you have Parkinson. They're making huge advances now. But some of the symptoms, just to talk quickly, is this 5 stages, they believe. The first two are kind of where my mother was for several years, where you can, still live independently, drive, be independent. You have maybe some will have tremors, like Mr. Michael J. Fox, which are noticeable. My mother
Mhm.
had more internal, so that kind of frustrated her because she felt like no one believed she was even, had Parkinson's. Also, things like posture, balance is mild, slight difficulty walking, changes in facial expression.
Mm.
Unfortunately, you get to number two now, walking and balancing becomes more difficult. Things like tremors, but rigidity. So, if an officer, example, if you're in criminal justice, tries to stop someone or even hold their hand, they might tense up, but it's not because they're fighting with the officer or upset. They just have been diagnosed. So, a lot of the signs, unfortunately, people misinterpret people with Parkinson's as a drunk or
Mhm.
drugs, or and this becomes a major issue in law enforcement and even just as a human being, if you're
Mhm.
not aware. Some of the other things too. So we move to stage three. Three is where they're more severe. However, the person can still be independent. Loss of balance, something called bradykinesia, which is more slowness of the movements. And they still can do things like eating and bathing, but that's when four and five, that's when I took over kind of my mother's life. And independent living is almost impossible because they're limited with eating, bathing, dressing, sleeping, waking. You're gonna might need a walker, and you have to also, I worried she would fall because that would have been even worse. And finally, the last stage, which is what unfortunately my mother had, and not everyone gets, is delusions and hallucinations, and those can be even more frightening than the disease itself.
Mm.
Also, weight loss, sleep disturbances, vision. I mean, this is what Parkinson's is. The list goes on. And as a caregiver, that would be again another show I always say, because that's just talking about what someone diagnosed goes through, but what someone caregiver is even more at times frightening, because I felt, although I didn't have Parkinson's, the diagnosis, I felt I holding her hand through the whole process. I felt like there was no difference.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, it seems like there's a lot of misconception and a lot of things that happen that are different between from person to person. Um, when it comes to experiencing it and others interpreting it and whether or not they whether or not they assume it's someone that's struggling with something or if it's on purpose. Often we see, at least what I from an outside perspective, you don't know until it's something that's obvious, right? You don't know what's something that's going on in someone's life or something that they're struggling with until really it's too late or there's something is really heavily impacting their lives to the point where it might be debilitating. Um, Obviously for you, it was your mother, so you were close to her. You saw a lot of this stuff happening, and like you mentioned, it sounds like she felt like no one would believe her about these internal things that were going on. Can you take us back to the beginning of when you guys started to first realize that something was changing in your mother and that there was things that were going on that might be serious?
Yeah, we were, again, she was diagnosed, we think, for many more years than I'm even aware. I feel like she either didn't know or she didn't want to burden the family, and I wish she did. I don't think, looking back, I could have done anything different because we still don't have a cure. But we went to
Hmm.
15 motor movement specialists, MDs, doctors, everyone said you don't die of Parkinson's, you die with it. My mother had no other medical issues ever. So
Mm.
we never, being told that, you rely on the doctor and you feel, oh, it's just something, it's not it stinks, but at least she'll be with us for, many years till 80 or 85 or who knows. But as this progressed, we saw it getting worse. So in the beginning, after 7 years, she had more stiffness in her left arm, but she could still drive and live independently. Unfortunately, she was getting many more of those symptoms we discussed were showing up, but again, nothing where I was too worried. She had gone, though, finally to a trial, which we do recommend trials because that's how we find a cure. But I
Mm.
won't say, I don't mention the school, the name, or any of that, but she went to one of the leading places for trials for Parkinson patients. And that night she came home, which I feel like she should have stayed there for a few days to monitor. Again, I don't blame the doctor or the school. I blame the disease. But that night was when my life changed. I got a call from my father in New York, and we were in Florida to rush over to my mother's house at 4 a.m. And I never had to do that before. I didn't know what was why. As an officer, in police, you're trained, but never to see what I found. So I got to my mother's house around 4 a.m. and I saw her from the distance moving her furniture out of her home. So I approached her and said, "What happened? What's going on?" And she said she thinks there's Nazis in her home and they're going to harm her. And that was when we rushed her to the emergency room and they said she would have died that night. And in a way, she felt like she and sadly died that night, but she still lived for 4 more years, but her health deteriorated. But that was the cause of, we think the medications changed too drastically. And that's the first night she had delusions and hallucinations, and that's something. If I could picture, if students have even heard of the movie A Beautiful Mind, I rushed my mother to the hospital, and again they thanked me because we saved her. I went back to her home, and I don't tell the story a lot because it's tough to even still. I'm 6'2", police, 200 pounds, but I can't really talk a lot about my mother because it's even 6 years later, it's tough. But so I
Mm.
went to her bedroom, which I never used to go in for privacy. I'm her son. And as I was picking up some things, the whole room surrounded the post-it notes, and I never saw this before. Like, what was going on? So I read a few of them, and they were actually names of animals and people who she wrote down that weren't alive anymore that she saw. And that's the first time I ever was introduced to what the word delusion, hallucination are. And again, not every person diagnosed gains these, but thankfully, individuals like, and sadly, same thing, sadly and thankfully, but Ryan Reynolds, who many students will know, the famous actor, he's been actually a spokesperson the last year for Parkinson's awareness, but more delusions, hallucinations, because his father also had Parkinson's and had these. And this is actually one area that no one, it's almost like unheard of and no one speaks about because, again, so tough to describe. But in my book, Sun Journey, I actually put, I don't know if you can see, but this is actually an iceberg. And it's a famous diagram called the Parkinson's iceberg. And as
Mhm.
you know, with any iceberg, you have the iceberg and underneath is the water. Well, Parkinson's is correlated a lot to what people see on the top or on the iceberg. Doesn't mean that that's
Mm.
all they're going through. It's all the things behind, 10, 20 things underneath that you don't see that's really even more tough to deal with.
Mm. Mm. Yeah. What I want to sort of pivot to sort of the awareness of the disease and how that um how the how people in the pursuit of finding a cure so that people are aware of like what's going on. Um and you might know some of this, maybe not. I'm just curious if you do. What do you know of any like obstacles? So like some of the biggest obstacles for the Parkinson's community and what they're facing today, whether it's finding a cure or just this maybe a stigma. You kind of already mentioned this a little bit with what how people perceive disease, but what are some of those big obstacles that the Parkinson's community is facing when it comes to the pursuit of a cure?
I think the biggest one is again awareness because the more, like today, if we reach one person, we've changed the world forever for that
Mm.
person and their family. But we probably, hopefully, if they share the show, maybe others too. But I think
Mm.
feeling alone, the loneliness is actually an actual topic that people don't talk about. And there's studies being done that loneliness can cause even progression, like a disease like Parkinson, because my mother was an example. It's not her fault, but she was ashamed and didn't want to leave the house. And it
Mhm.
was a struggle. Thankfully, we were able to bring her in the backyard, but she didn't want to be around people.
Mhm.
One part that breaks my heart is some of her best friends vanished. Like, I don't think they could tolerate or take seeing my mother, going in a decline, and that was sad. I
Yeah.
think some of those struggles, also the caregiver, so many things that I wasn't prepared for. I felt like I was thrown in a way, like when you're going to your first trial or first day in police field, just thrown into with the wolves, and you have to figure it out on your own. But also, there is a lot of hope, though. There are a lot of, I've interviewed over 2,000 people around the world, written on Together for Sharon. If you click interviews, it's completely free. I
Mhm.
also have a show and we've interviewed 300 people and we've already booked till 2027. So that
Wow.
means it's, in a way, again, it's nice, but it's sad too, because I don't want to, I want us to find a cure and stop all of this. But there have been some incredible, thanks to the Michael J. Fox Foundation, the researchers around the world. It's really a team. I have a few researchers on my show last week from the Netherlands. So, Parkinson's affects everyone from France, Italy, Spain, you name it, even Africa is affected. And I have so many stories I could tell you there. Actually, in Africa, I had a gentleman who his mother had Parkinson's and they believed it was witchcraft. So they took her from him. It almost sounds like a horror movie or a documentary. It needs to be done. They took her away, isolated her, and she passed. But she wasn't allowed to be near the civilians because they thought it's something that could share or spread, which is not true. But back to the advances through the Michael J. Fox, they found something called a biomarker. So now it's a little evasive, but a needle can be placed in the spine and you can determine if you have Parkinson's. So that's still tough because it's, not everyone wants a needle, but
Mhm.
hoping in the next few years to get it to where you can have a little regular, like a blood test in every doctor in the nation. So that would change the world of going, it's not a cure, but it would help people. And there is one thing today and that's exercise. I wrote a book on it, but sports and exercise can actually, science shows it can slow the progression. So it won't stop it, but knowing, if you have Parkinson's, you know that you can do a sport. It doesn't have to be something like, mountain climbing or this, but you just walking or just elliptical or treadmill at home. You can add many years to your life. So that's game changing. There's also many other, they believe there's 175 drugs tested right now. There's
Mhm.
not many out there for people with Parkinson's. They all do different things, but there's nothing like one is a carba and levodopa, which can slow the tremors, but that still doesn't affect the rest of the other things that are happening with Parkinson's. There's also more screening happening. Unfortunately, there's 80,000 more patients out there, but they're able to now, thanks to social media, join into awareness and also more clinical trials happening. Again, we're all at DC every year now, so that's the biggest thing. I think that if we can get more people to, again, reach out to their legislators, even right now after we end the show, that can change the
Mhm.
world because, there are voices, even doesn't matter too what side you're on. This is not a political thing, it's a bipartisan thing. Everybody wants a cure. I don't think there's many issues in the politics today. We can all agree 100%, but this one you could be better believe. I hope we can.
For sure. For the listener who might be going through something like this or have may have a family member that's struggling with this or just they have never even heard of someone talk about this, what are some what's a sort of an encouragement or what would be something that you could leave our viewers with that is an encouragement to their faith, to their view of Parkinson's and people who are struggling with this and what goes on in people's lives that they don't know from the surface or from what the looks of it.
Well, I wanted to first thank you and the university for the opportunity to, this is actually, especially again around the holiday, a tough time, but it's so encouraging, inspiring, and also just an incredible tribute, not just to my mother, but to all those who lost their battle, but also today for those battling and their families, because no one's ever alone in this fight. Again, all the work I do, whether it's the website or traveling, I'll be in Arizona actually at a big thing called the World Parkinson Congress, where everyone around the world meets once every few years to talk and advocate with scientists and people diagnosed. But again, if everyone listening supports your show, also share the show, and maybe we'll change the world for others. I always end my show with a little statement that I would like to you, to the whole crew there, to the whole university, and to all my students and other students, and just everyone listening and their families, that we love you, we support you, we care about you, and you're never alone. I, along with Danny and the incredible university, will advocate for you, and I feel together our voices are so much stronger. Now we say I'm just getting started because although I lost my mother 6 years ago, and some days are tough, whether we all have our own medical issues, politics in the world going on, even school, finals are coming. It's tough, but on those days where I feel like giving up, I gain inspiration from you, from all my students, and also that journey out there that I'm not aware of, that keeps me realizing I can't give up because we still have work to be done. But one guest, a group of four that I didn't even know about, and you might now. Everyone could go to my website again, click podcasts. I think it was season 1 or 2, but we had two guests on. Well, one of the guests was a crew of four, and they got on a boat. It literally looked like a rowboat. They sailed around the world from Hawaii to literally worldwide. They raised about $10 million on the trip for Parkinson's, and one of the gentlemen rowing in the boat has Parkinson's, and he didn't give up. There's actually a
Wow.
documentary about it, and just some of the things that people around the world, they're climbing Mount Kilimanjaro with Parkinson's, they're rock climbing with Parkinson's, they're doing things that I can't even. They're running. I'll be at the Disney Marathon. I can't run because I've had 4 back surgeries myself, but I'll be
Mm.
walking for in memory of my mother, but to gain awareness and fundraise for Michael J. Fox Foundation, Team Fox. But when you hear the stories of people who are struggling, or families who lost someone, but they're still pushing forward and we still fight on in their memory, that's what keeps me going. And again, just so grateful even for the time today, because like I said, if we just change one person's life, I think of me and my mother and how we felt alone and that the world didn't hear us. And now today they are. And, she lives on through you, through the show, and through all the work. Even my students, I always put a little announcement about my work, and they all, really nice, beautiful emails I get. But, we'll be out there fighting until there's a cure. And I hope someday we can say that now we can stop because everybody out there doesn't have to battle this anymore. And I feel through God, religion, faith, and community, it's the only way we can all join together for the same purpose, same ideal, and same mission to end this disease.
Mm. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Ackerman. This was a blessing, and I learned a lot. To learn more about his story and help fight for a cure, you can visit his website at www.togetherforsharon.com.